Hey, happy Friday. I asked yesterday what you all would be interested in me talking about today, and I got a couple of responses and a couple of private messages, and the requests all really fall into this category of how to do boundaries in your relationship. So we're going to talk about boundaries. I know a couple of you have questions about how to have boundaries specifically in relationship with addicts. And so this will be relevant for that as well. So post any questions that you have below. I'm going to keep my eye on the comment feed. So if something comes up while we're live, I'm happy to address that. Welcome to those of you who are here. My name is Jenny Glick. I'm a relationship mentor in this space. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a certified sex therapist. I've worked with couples and individuals and families for 20 years. So for those of you who don't know me, that's what I do. And now I work as a mentor. So what that means, how it is that is different is, after spending so much time therapeutically with folks, which is wonderful. There's such a place for therapy. Most of my best friends are therapists. I've spent a lifetime in therapy, so really helpful. The difference with what I do is we're really looking at where you are now and how to move you forward. Therapy often is looking at where you are now and why you're there, what's happened in the past, understanding what has happened, processing trauma, and there is absolutely a time and place for that, 100%. What I do now at this stage of my career is help women who are in a place where they're stuck, and they often know why. A lot of women who I work with, and some of you in this space, you tell me, here's what's going on. Maybe I'm married to an addict, or I don't know how to set boundaries, or I'm repeating patterns from childhood, or I don't have self-worth, or I sabotage myself. Right? The women in this space and the women who I tend to attract to work with me are super sophisticated. They know, right? And you often don't necessarily need me to tell you, though I might have insight to shine a light on a part of you that you otherwise wouldn't see. I have a mentor who says, you can't read the ingredients in the jar when you're in the jar, right? And so when you're in your own jar, you can't read what's going on outside. So that's the value of having a mentor, is to guide you wherever it is that you are to get to where you want to be. What's so interesting to me is often when I start working with women, and those of you, if you have been in this space for a while, before we work together, I'll ask you a few questions because I want to know where you are now, what's happening right now in your relationship, because there are some women who I'm not the best to work with you. You maybe should be working with a therapist, or the situation that you have is just not best suited for me. But I also want to know where you want to be instead. And easily 50% of women who I ask that question to, where do you want to be instead, they don't know. And part of the difficulty in going from where you are to where you want to be is if you don't know where you want to be, it makes it really hard to get there, right? And so even imagining where you want to be instead. So for those of you who asked me to talk about boundaries, right, part of that is getting some handle on what do you want instead. Most people say, I don't know what I want, but I don't want it to be this, which is okay, right? Like, I don't want to be in the fire. I want to get out of the fire. That makes sense. You don't want to burn up, so it makes a lot of sense. And in order to get out of that fire, unless it's a crisis, and for some of you, it's a crisis, and I don't work with people when it's a crisis. If your house is on fire, if you're not safe, if there's abuse, you need to get out. You don't need to talk and process about that. You need to get safe, right? But if you find that you're living in the fire, that you've chosen because it's patterned to be in the fire, you need to decide where it is that you want to be instead, right? So you have to start imagining it. What would it look like? What would it feel like? How would you need to show up, right? You really need to start imagining, because if you can't imagine it, it makes it hard to get there. Often when I talk to women, and they'll give me a little bit of what they want, and then I help to fill out that picture, and they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. And once we have that framework, like, oh my gosh, you mean I could live in a house like that? Like I could have 3 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms, and I could have a backyard for my dogs. It's like we sometimes we need someone, a guide. I think of myself as a way shower, right? We need someone to say, yeah, actually, this is possible in your relationship. And so to get clear on what it is that you would want instead. So for those of you who've said to me, I don't know how to set boundaries. One of you said, I've 7 years not been setting boundaries with my partner. Great. So you know what you're not doing. And what would you want it to look like, feel like instead? And you really have to spend some time there, right? And then you have to ask yourself this really important question. Who do I need to be in order to make that happen? And here's the pickle in this moment, right? So I'm going to try to explain this to you all. So ask me any questions below. I'll come back in and answer them if I'm not clear enough. The person that you need to be in order to get there is by definition the person who you are not right now. Okay? Because if you were already that person with the 3-bedroom house with the 4 bathrooms in the yard, to use that as an analogy, if you were already that person, you wouldn't want that. Does that make sense? Which is why it feels so impossible. Because if you knew how to do boundaries, you wouldn't be dreaming about doing boundaries. You would have the capacity to set a boundary, to know what you want, to tolerate the discomfort of your partner's anxiety, their distress, their anger when you set a boundary. Is this making sense to you? And so the reason why we need coaches, mentors, guides, way showers, people that move us forward is because our job is to help you get clear on where it is that you want to go, and then practice being the person every single day so that you can go and you can walk your little beautiful self to that place every single day so that you can become her. You can become her. And here's the thing, is you become her in the specifics, not the generals. I'm going to be talking about this a lot. Those of you who've been in the space for a while maybe have noticed in the last month or so, I've really changed how I'm showing up here. And I'm just telling it all. I'm just giving it all to you. I'm telling you. You know why? Because we need all hands on deck right now. And my hope is that this is a space for women who are like, game on, let's freaking do this. There's no more let's wait till tomorrow or when it's better or easier. No, like now's the time. And so some of you are going to take what I tell you and just run and do it. Amen. And some of you are going to want to do it quicker, and you want to highly specialize, and you want to make sure that you're hitting all the marks. And if that's you, then private message me and we'll have a conversation, okay? But the transformation happens in the specifics. And what that means is you need to have someone look at you to see exactly what's going on. It's like physical therapy, right? So you can make those adjustments. It's the difference between doing yoga, like I do yoga here on the floor next to my desk with my, computer monitor, and I watch somebody live who's in New York City, and which is fine, and I get to do my yoga practice, so that's great. But it's not the same as having a yoga teacher here who can like shift my hips and move this. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what it's supposed to feel like, right? Because the transformation happens in the specifics, happens in the slight shift here or there. In the general, so I want to get specific here about those of you with boundaries. I will talk in here about boundaries, and you will listen to it and be like, wow, that sounds like a really great idea. We're talking about the general, right? And it is a great idea. And there are thousands of books on boundaries, and you could read those things. But here's the thing. Until you're willing to have a boundary with yourself and say, I need support, I need a program, I need a plan, I need to commit to something, that's a container, that's a boundary, to teach me to have boundaries, then learning about boundaries is just a cognitive process, and it's something you read about, and it's not something you do. I'm going to say that in a couple different ways because I want you to get it. Okay? Books are amazing. I love books. I read a lot of books and always have. And books give us information on general things, right? So we have a general concept. And then for some of us, like if you want to learn about Tony Robbins, you can go read all of his books. He's written like 50 of them, right? But then if you were to work with him one-on-one, he would dial in specifically for you. Some people want to read the books. Amazing. Awesome. Right? That's fantastic. There's great. The specifics, to have someone look at your thing with boundary, right? Because you well know that you get tripped up in boundaries. Most of us do, in some way, shape, or form. And the learning comes in that moment when you want to set the boundary. You know you should set the boundary. You read the book about the boundary. You listen to this, video about the boundary. But then you don't do it because what happens is the old patterning comes up. The old patterning of fear, anxiety, worry. What will happen? What will he or she say? I can't do this. I don't know if I'm going to do it right. Now's not a good time. And then we default back. Most of you in this space, if you are feeling like you're struggling in relationship, and there are a chunk of you in here who aren't struggling in a relationship, you're happy in your relationship, and you use what I teach as a tune-up. Love it. Stay here with me. I love it. It's great. But those of you who find yourself in the struggle, right, to get a little bit more spiritual, the invitation is to heal the parts of you that want to default back into old patterns that keep you disempowered. So I want to speak a little bit directly to addiction. If you're in a relationship with somebody who has an addiction, classically, that means that you are codependent, right? You can read so many books on codependency. Most people are codependent in some way in their relationship, whether they're married to an addict or not. Melody Beatty is sort of one of the many mothers of codependency, but check out any of her books. They're amazing. And just like if your partner, let's say, has an addiction with alcohol, they might need to get sober from alcohol, but you need to get sober from your addiction around codependency. And part of how you heal codependency is learning to have boundaries, learning, and I'm going to say, like, learning is in your head, doing is embodying, is actually showing up and committing to yourself. It's really easy when I marry somebody, especially if they're an addict or if I'm in a relationship with them, it's really easy to say, well, when they get sober, then. And I'm just going to be straight with you. It's kind of a big cop-out, honestly, because it makes it super easy to make it the other person's problem. And it's not, because it's your choice to be with this person. And I know I say choice, and I know that there are lots of financial reasons and family reasons that we stay with people, and that's fine. And you can stay with the person for all of those reasons and become sober to your own addiction with codependency, which is much more difficult than just wanting the other person to become sober, right? And so it is our job to grow ourselves up as grown-ass women. And it's the men's job too, but this is a women's space, so I'm talking to us because we're extraordinarily powerful. And many of us are really afraid of our power. Many of us are afraid of really taking stock of the power and authority that we have in our lives. And so we end up spending our life force waiting for the other person to change. I had an interaction with a woman this week, and she said, yeah, I totally know that I have my stuff, but he really needs to do his work, and I'm not willing to change unless he is. And it was such a heartbreak for me, only because if she already knows, if he's already spent 25 years saying he's not going to do anything, it means she doesn't have to take responsibility for her own life. And the heartbreak in it is that it means that I am giving my quality of life to someone else, my partner, who doesn't love themselves enough to do their stuff. And this sounds really mean. I don't mean it mean. I mean it from a place of, you know, those of us, when we've gotten more sober from our addictive patterns, and I was there with my own addiction to resentment and anger and criticism and all the things that I teach about. I know it because I have letters behind my name, but because I went through it as well and had to grow myself up as well. When you get to the other side of that, just like addiction, sober people look at addicts and are like, it's so much better over here. Yeah, it requires some work and you have to show up and you have to decide and it's not easy, but man, is it better, right? And so when somebody's like, yeah, I know, but I'm not going to get sober until he gets sober, so I'm just going to go back in, right? It's like, oh, okay. And totally okay. Not my job, because I would be codependent if I tried to convince you to love yourself enough to do whatever the thing is. Find the book and apply it. Listen to all my videos and then do it. Great, right? Make that happen. In order to practice getting back to boundaries and addiction, if you're in a relationship with somebody who's an addict, you have to do your own sobriety work first around codependence. And you're married to somebody who is the perfect teacher, because they're not going to make it easy for you. Bravo! Some of us need it hard. You know, some of us don't want to take the easy way. And so we need the struggle. And so game on, man. It's the big I get to. You get to show up in these ways. You get to love yourself enough to find a structure, commit to the book, commit to going to Codependence Anonymous, get a sponsor, whatever it is that you need to do, and then commit to it, which some of us have a really hard time doing. And we need somebody to hold our feet to the fire, which I get. I'm that person when it comes to exercise. This time of COVID has been a challenge. I have a hard time holding myself accountable to something. I would rather invest with someone who I have to meet at the gym, or who's going to come to my house, or is going to run with me, because left to my own devices, I'm not going to go run because I don't like it and I don't want to, right? And so if we know that about ourselves, then we create a structure to hold us in, right? So that we can really do it in a way that's good for us and our body. I used to have a weightlifting coach who I loved, and his wife's in here, so if she's watching this. And part of what was so great about it, right, this is the transformation happens in the specifics, is having someone who could look at how I was holding the bar and he could make little tweaks so I wouldn't hurt myself, so that I could nail it. Right? So your specifics around your boundaries, looking at where is it that you trip up? What's the pattern that you default back to? What's the story that you're telling yourself? Right? We have to get really good at paying attention to the self-talk that we have in our heads, the narratives that we're running, because the narrative that you're running now is what you're going to get tomorrow. And if I have the narrative that like now's not a good time to heal from my addiction, tomorrow's not going to be a better time because this is my belief system. Right? So I hope that this is helpful for those of you who asked about boundaries. If you're in a relationship with an addict, you need to get sober. You need to look at what your sobriety work is. And it's not a substance maybe for you, but it's a pattern. It's an emotional pattern. I firmly know and believe that we can become addicted to our anxiety. We can become addicted to all kinds of things emotionally because we go back to it. We have a patterning where we go back there over and over and over, and it becomes our go-to, right? So we have to learn how to pattern what we want, our goal out here: ease, joy, relaxation, acceptance. A lot of women I work with don't even think about that. They're so used to going to anxiety and worry. So patterns matter. Your thought pattern matters. Your thinking, feeling, doing, and belief system is everything. Your beliefs are everything. Change your beliefs and you will change your life. The transformation happens in the specifics with you, right? And you can do that on your own. Absolutely. Commit to it, hold yourself to it, and make it happen. Or if you want to fast track to it, private message me and we'll have a conversation, see if I can help you. I hope that's helpful for those of you who messaged. Have a wonderful Friday, wonderful weekend. Thanks so much for being here. Feel free to invite any of your friends. I'm happy to have any of your women friends here. It's a women's only space, but happy to have anyone here who identifies as a woman, and have a beautiful evening, afternoon, weekend. And please post any comments, takeaways, questions below, and I will get to them